if you've been following the World Swimming Champs, you will have seen David Popovici in the 100 and 200 freestyle. He's a 17-year-old Romanian who won both of those events. And especially in this 200 that we're about to dig into, he is just one of the best looking strokes that I've seen for a 200 freestyle. He holds so much water. He makes it look so easy and so comfortable. And I want to dig into a couple aspects of his technique. Now, we have done a full analysis on his stroke a few months ago, but I was getting quite a few comments on previous videos saying, can you take a look at this 200 freestyle? So we're going to dig into it, and I want to talk about a couple aspects that you might find useful for your own swimming. Now, we're going to have a look at his breath timing to begin with, because if you can get the breath at the right time, then everything else comes together so much better. But if your breathing's too late, which is often the case, then it makes everything else a lot harder to do. So with the breath timing, what we're aiming to do here is when the hand passes underneath your shoulder, so you'll see in his right arm or his right hand, it's about to pass under his shoulder. His head begins to turn at that same point. So he turns the head there. The face is already out of the water now, getting the breath, before this hand has even exited the water. Now the cue that we use there, the trigger word is pull into the breath. So as that hand comes under, you want to pull into the breath. Then he gets that breath. Now the more important thing though is when his eyes come back down here, you'll see that his eyes are already looking down by the time he's finished his catch on that left arm. So if we bring it back, eyes are off to the side, eyes are down now. So the eyes are looking down there at the time he's finished his catch. Now the reason that's important is because if your eyes are back down, you can get back to flat, get back onto the other side, so that then when you are here, you've connected this up with your body. But if your head's still off to the side at that point, your hips and shoulders will be off to the side, and you're not going to be able to connect up this catch with your rotation or your body as well as you possibly could. So we want to pull into the breath so we can get the eyes back down pretty much towards the end of that catch there. That's what we're aiming to do. So that's the first thing. Now, the other thing that we often look at is the timing of the stroke. And if you've been to one of our clinics or you've gone through our 8-week faster freestyle course, one of the concepts that we talk about here is the timing of the stroke. Now, with this timing of the stroke, we want it to typically be front quadrant. So what we mean by front quadrant is that if we split the body into 4 quarters here, and I haven't done that very well, but you can imagine that's 4 quarters. The front quadrant is this one here in front of the head. Now, if you're swimming front quadrant freestyle, it would mean that there's always something, say your hand or your arm, in front of your head during the stroke there. That's what swimming front quadrant means. Now, there are certainly exceptions there. There are some swimmers that aren't always in the front quadrant, especially on one side. But most swimmers tend to be. So for the majority of swimmers that I coach, we'd typically want to aim to be in that front quadrant. But there are certainly exceptions there. Now, you can see with David here, on his breathing side, so this arm here, so he's breathing on that stroke, you'll notice that he's definitely clearly in that front quadrant because that arm's still out in front, this hand's just passed, so he's clearly in that front quadrant there. Now, what a lot of swimmers tend to do is that's where they're not front quadrant, because a lot of times when people are breathing, they'll turn their head either too far to the side or they'll just over rotate, and this arm in front, it's not out there long enough, so their arm ends up dropping down, and at this point it's not in front, it would be underneath them, so they're not in the front quadrant on their breathing stroke. But you can see here that he clearly is in that front quadrant. The other way you can think of that is like 3/4 catch up. You're just kind of keeping that arm out there for a little bit. Now have a look at the other stroke here. So this one here, you'll see he starts to catch a bit sooner on his right arm. So at this point right here, he is front quadrant, but only just, right? So we've got that there. Yep, he's still in that front quadrant, but he's just in it at that point. And you only need to be just in it, but you'll see he's only just in it at that point. But on his other side, let's go through it here. On his other side, he's more in that front quadrant. So that's what leads to this little bit more of like a galloping sort of stroke, where he reaches and rotates on one side a bit more, and then he starts to catch a bit sooner on the other. And that's one of the common misconceptions, I think, with swimming or freestyle, is that you don't need to be completely even on one side, especially if you just breathe to the one side. The stroke's probably going to be a little bit different from the left side to the right. So while, yeah, it might be good for When you're training, you want to perhaps breathe to both sides a little bit more just to keep things balanced. But just in general, the stroke doesn't need to be completely symmetrical on both sides. And you'll notice it there with his stroke. So we look at the timing, he's just in that front quadrant and a bit more so on that breathing side. But for swimmers who aren't necessarily this quick or this experienced, the side where they're less front quadrant is often the one where they're breathing, because they're either getting the breath late, they're turning their head too far, or they're just not taking enough time to reach forwards out the front there. So you got to be patient, a little patient with that reaching arm in front there. Now, the other thing we'll have a look at here is his recovery. So another sort of common misconception that we get in swimming is that with the recovery, that classic thought of a high elbow recovery brings the hand too close to the body. That's very restrictive. It jams you up through your shoulder. And you'll notice here with David that the hand, it's a decent way out there. It's not close to his body. Yeah, his elbow's pointing up to the sky, which is great. That's how you want to come over the water. But the hand isn't really close to the body because it's too restrictive and quite uncomfortable for most people. So let that hand swing away from the body a little bit, not super wide. Like if you're out here, then that's going to cause you to lose a bit of balance there. But same on this side, nice recovery, elbows up, hands out to the side. So you can swing that hand around, and then he obviously enters in line with the shoulder. The other part of that is you can kind of see it there through his hand. He's reasonably relaxed through the hand. You don't want to carry tension in the recovery. It's wasted effort, and you can't recover. It's very hard to recover quickly if you're tense through the hand. So you've got to relax the hand a little bit over that recovery part of the stroke. And then you can keep the hand kind of relaxed through the reach and the catch as well. So here we can see some underwater footage, and often we'll look at the kick and the catch at this point. So you'll see some of those classic things that we often teach when we're doing the 8-week course, and when I'm showing you these videos here, is he gets the entry, he's just kind of getting the fingers in first, which is all you need to get. Then he reaches forwards and he gets that starting catch position of fingers just below the wrist just below the elbow, and you're essentially straight out in front with the hand about shoulder or underarm depth there. Then he slows it down a little bit through there as he then sets up his catch, and you can see that catch there looks really good. If we draw that line from his shoulder to his fingertips, you'll notice that the elbow's just above it. So if we think of the high elbow catch, that's what a high elbow catch is. So at that point you can see he's set up there. And I know it's not completely side on, so we can't see his catch perfectly, but when people sometimes think of a high elbow catch, they think they need to be really extreme, like a 90-degree catch there. But again, probably not comfortable or sustainable for most swimmers. So if you've been through our 5-day catch challenge, which I know many of you have, you know that you don't need to be extreme with your high elbow position. Just anywhere in that high elbow range is all we're after. And you can see here, the fastest 200 freestyle in the world is only just in that high elbow position, at least at this speed here. Let's have a look at the right arm. Similar thing, enters, reaches forwards out in front. Again, sets up that catch really nicely. And we can kind of see it here. I mean, I imagine he's just in another pretty similar high elbow position there. A little bit hard to see from that angle though. So there's some of those key things that I noticed in the race. Just the beautiful stroke. And I mean, from the podcast that I did last week with Kenneth Graham from EO, one of the things that he's a sports scientist who's recognized is that those at the elite level, they tend to be more consistent than those at the non-elite level, as in each stroke that they take is almost a replica of the one before it. So as a swimmer, if you can be consistent with your strokes, especially in something like a pool race like this, where you are able to maintain the same catch, the same distance per stroke, all that sort of stuff, then that's what leads to really good swimming. So when you're making any changes to your stroke, we often find that people will get maybe half the strokes right when they're making these adjustments, and then half of them will be the old way. But over time, as you practice it more and more, you tend to be more consistent with those better strokes. So if you can then do, even if it was 90 out of 100 strokes with good technique, then that's what will help you, lead to be a better swimmer. And as you watch through here, my point here is that with David, you'll see that like he's just it's like clockwork from the first stroke to the last stroke, it's just like clockwork. The only thing that really changes there is just the stroke rate as he picks it up a little bit towards the end there. So that's what we want to try and be, is consistent. And we're not, in order to swim faster, the concept that sometimes people have to understand is that for them, it's not often a case of trying harder or pushing harder. It's about being more efficient with their movements and moving in a better way. And that's not often meaning that you need to put more effort into it. It's actually got to become a bit more effortless, hence the name Effortless Swimming. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Subscribe if you haven't to our channel, or if you're following this on Instagram, then follow us on Instagram. And yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. I'll be back next week with another video.